The organ music was echoing through St. Matthew's Church as I stood there in my ivory silk wedding dress, looking out at 250 faces staring back at me. The late morning sun was streaming through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the worn wooden pews. My mother was beaming in the front row, wearing that lavender dress we'd spent 3 hours picking out at Macy's. Robert's hand was trembling in mine as Pastor Williams opened his worn leather Bible. For 6 months, I dreamed about this moment. Walking down the aisle, saying my vows, becoming Mrs. Robert Chin. I'd imagined how perfect it would be, how happy I'd feel, how complete my life would become. But as I stood there at that altar, surrounded by everyone I loved, I wasn't thinking about happiness or completeness. I was thinking about the text messages I discovered on my mother's phone. I was thinking about the journal entries I'd read in her handwriting. I was thinking about the 3 months of lies, betrayal, and planning that had led us all to this moment. When Pastor Williams reached the part about objections, when he asked if anyone had just cause why Robert and I should not be joined in marriage, I knew this was my moment. I stepped forward and said the words that made my mother go completely white and my fiancé's face crumble in panic. Actually, I need to say something first. The entire church went dead silent. 250 people frozen in time, programs clutched in their hands, watching what they thought would be the happiest moment of my life turn into something completely different. But let me tell you how we got here, because this story didn't start at that altar. It started 8 months ago with what seemed like the most perfect proposal. Hey everyone, before we dive into this incredible story, I need your help. This channel is brand new and I'm putting my heart and soul into bringing you the most compelling real-life stories. If you're enjoying this content, hitting that subscribe button, giving this video a like, and sharing it would mean the absolute world to me. Drop a comment too. I read every single one and your thoughts keep me motivated. Now let's get into what happened. My name is Sandra, I'm 26 years old, and I work as a marketing coordinator for a small tech startup here in Austin, Texas. I make about $42,000 a year, live in a one-bedroom apartment that costs way too much of my paycheck, and drive a 2018 Honda Civic that I'm still making payments on. Up until last week, I thought I had my life pretty well figured out. I grew up in a small house on the east side of Austin with just my mom and me. My dad, David, died in a car accident when I was 8 years old. He was driving home from his job at the auto parts store during a thunderstorm, and an 18-wheeler ran a red light. Mom always said he died instantly, that he didn't suffer, but I could see in her eyes that losing him destroyed something inside her. After Dad died, Mom, Lisa, became both parents to me. She was 33 then, still young and beautiful, but she never really dated seriously again. She'd go out occasionally, coffee with a guy from church, dinner with a coworker, but she always said I was her priority and she didn't want to bring complications into our lives. It's just you and me, kiddo, she'd say when I'd ask why she didn't have a boyfriend like my friends' moms. We're a team. Mom worked as a secretary at State Farm Insurance for 18 years, taking night classes at the community college to eventually become a paralegal. She never made a lot of money, but she managed to buy our little house and put me through college at UT with a combination of her savings, my part-time job, and student loans. We were incredibly close. I called her every day, had dinner at her house at least twice a week, and she was the first person I called with good news, bad news, or just when I needed someone to talk to. She knew everything about my life, and I thought I knew everything about hers. Then, 8 months ago, I met Robert, and everything changed. I met Robert at Central Market, of all places. I was in the produce section, trying to decide between organic and regular strawberries while calculating if I could afford the organic ones, when this guy behind me said, "Go with the organic. Life's too short for mediocre strawberries." I turned around and saw this really cute guy, maybe 29 or 30, with dark hair and kind eyes, wearing a button-down shirt and khakis like he'd just gotten off work. We ended up talking for 20 minutes about strawberries, then coffee, then everything else. Robert worked as a loan officer at First National Bank downtown. He wasn't rich. He made about $55,000 a year and drove a 2019 Honda Accord that he was proud of because he'd saved up for the down payment. But he was stable, kind, funny, and he treated me better than any guy I'd ever dated. On our third date, he insisted on meeting my mom. "If I'm going to be in your life," he said, "I need to know the most important person in your life approves of me." Mom loved him immediately. He brought her flowers, not expensive roses, just a small bouquet of daisies from H-E-B, and spent 2 hours at her kitchen table asking her about her work, her hobbies, her opinions on everything from Austin traffic to the best barbecue in town. "He's a keeper," she whispered to me while he was in the bathroom. "He actually listens when I talk." After 6 months of dating, Robert started talking about marriage. Not in a pressured way, just casually mentioning things like, "when we get married," or "in our future house." I was completely head over heels in love with him, and the idea of spending my life with someone so kind and steady felt like winning the lottery. The proposal happened on Mom's birthday. We were at Olive Garden, her favorite restaurant, even though I always teased her about the unlimited breadsticks, celebrating her turning 48. She'd had a rough year at work, with layoffs and restructuring, and I wanted to make her birthday special. Right after they brought out her cake, Robert suddenly got up from his chair and dropped to one knee right there in the restaurant. "Sandra," he said, pulling out a small velvet box, "6 months ago, I met the most amazing woman at Central Market. But over these months, I've also gotten to know her incredible mother, and I realized I'm not just asking to marry you. I'm asking to become part of your family." He turned to Mom, who was already crying. "Lisa, would you give me permission to marry your daughter? I promise I'll love her and take care of her the way you taught me to." Mom was sobbing now, nodding frantically. Yes, of course. I couldn't ask for a better son-in-law. The ring wasn't huge. It was a 1-carat diamond in a simple setting that probably cost him a few months' salary, but it was beautiful and it was mine. The whole restaurant was watching and clapping, and I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. That night, after Robert left, Mom and I sat on her couch looking at my ring and planning our future. "I'm so happy for you, sweetheart," she said, squeezing my hand. "You deserve someone who loves you the way Robert does. I want you to help plan everything," I told her. "The wedding, the dress shopping, all of it. This is as much your day as mine." Her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? You'd want me that involved?" "Mom, you've been dreaming about my wedding day longer than I have. Of course I want you involved." That's when I started noticing the first changes in her. Within a week of the engagement, Mom had thrown herself into wedding planning with an intensity that both touched and slightly overwhelmed me. She bought 3 different wedding planning books, created a Pinterest board with 847 pins, and made a color-coded spreadsheet tracking everything from venue options to flower costs. "I know I'm going overboard," she said one evening when I found her surrounded by bridal magazines and fabric samples. "But I've been dreaming about this day since you were a little girl playing dress-up in my old prom dresses." But it wasn't just the wedding planning that changed. Mom started changing physically too. She joined Planet Fitness and began working out 5 days a week. She'd never been overweight, but suddenly she was doing cardio classes and lifting weights with a determination I'd never seen before. "I want to look good in the wedding photos," she explained when I commented on her new routine. "And I just feel so energetic and motivated since the engagement. Planning your wedding has given me a new purpose." She also started spending money on herself in ways she never had before. New workout clothes, a professional haircut, and highlights at an actual salon instead of the great clips she'd been going to for years, manicures every 2 weeks, and a few new outfits that were nicer than her usual Target purchases. "You deserve to treat yourself," I told her when she seemed guilty about the expenses. "You've spent 18 years putting me first. It's time to invest in your own happiness too." The 3 of us, Mom, Robert, and I, fell into this perfect rhythm. Every Sunday, we'd have dinner at Mom's house. She'd spend hours cooking elaborate meals, pot roast with all the fixings, homemade chicken and dumplings, her famous apple pie that took half the day to make properly. Robert would arrive early to help her cook, and I'd find them in the kitchen together, laughing over some joke or deep in conversation about politics or movies or whatever random topic had come up. He'd compliment her cooking, ask for her recipes, and treat her like the mother he'd never really had. His own parents had divorced when he was young and were both remarried with new families. "Your mom is incredible," he told me one evening as we drove home from Sunday dinner. "She's so wise and funny. I can see where you get your best qualities." "She likes you too," I said. I've never seen her warm up to anyone this quickly. And it was true. Mom seemed to light up whenever Robert was around. She'd laugh more, talk more animatedly, and I'd catch her checking her appearance in the mirror before he arrived. She'd always been beautiful, but suddenly she seemed to glow with confidence and happiness. "I think planning your wedding is the most fun I've had in years," she told me one day while we were addressing invitations. "I feel useful and needed and excited about the future. I haven't felt like that since before your dad died. I was so happy that my two favorite people in the world loved each other." Most of my friends complained about tension between their boyfriends and their families, but I felt incredibly lucky that Robert and Mom had formed such a strong bond. But there were little moments that, looking back, should have made me pay closer attention. Like how Robert always seemed to know exactly what would make Mom happy. He'd bring her coffee from the McDonald's on 5th Street because somehow he'd figured out that was her favorite, even though I didn't know that. He'd remember that she liked crossword puzzles and bring her new puzzle books. He'd notice when she was stressed about work and ask thoughtful questions about her cases. Or how Mom started acting different when Robert was around. More animated, more giggly, more flirtatious, I guess, though I didn't want to think of it that way at the time. She'd touch his arm when she laughed at his jokes, compliment his clothes or his cologne, and seem genuinely disappointed when he had to leave. "Your mom is amazing," Robert would say after every visit. "I hope I can be half as good a parent to our kids as she was to you." "She really loves you," I'd reply. Sometimes I think she's more excited about this wedding than I am. I thought it was sweet that they'd formed such a close relationship. I thought it meant our marriage would be stronger because my husband and my mother genuinely cared about each other. I had no idea what was really happening. The first time I felt something was really wrong was about 4 months after we got engaged. It was a Wednesday in March, and I'd had one of those days at work where everything went sideways. Our biggest client was unhappy with a campaign we'd been working on for months. My boss was taking it out on me, and I was genuinely worried about losing my job. I needed comfort, and comfort for me had always meant Mom's house. So instead of going home to my apartment, I drove straight to her place around 6 p.m., planning to ugly cry on her couch while she made me tea and told me everything would be okay. When I pulled into her driveway, I was surprised to see Robert's silver Honda Accord already there. It was a Wednesday evening, and Robert usually worked until 7 p.m. Plus, he never went to Mom's house without me. It had just never come up. I let myself in with my key, calling out as I walked in. "Mom? Robert? I had the worst day ever, and I need chocolate and sympathy. In here, honey." Mom's voice came from the living room, but something about her tone was off. It sounded breathless, flustered. I found her standing by the couch, running her hands through her hair in a way that made it look messy. She was wearing this silk blouse I'd never seen before, something in a deep blue that brought out her eyes and was definitely nicer than her usual around-the-house clothes. Her cheeks were flushed pink, and her lipstick looked smudged. "Sandra, I wasn't expecting you. Is everything okay? You look upset." "Just work drama." "Where's Robert?" "I saw his car outside." Mom's eyes darted toward the kitchen, then toward the back of the house, then back to me. "Oh, he stepped outside to take a work call. You know how the bank is about those client calls. They can't be interrupted." The living room smelled different than usual. Instead of Mom's usual vanilla candles, there was a masculine scent in the air, cologne. Robert's cologne, but stronger than it usually was, like he'd been there for a while. On the coffee table, I noticed 2 wine glasses with dark red residue in the bottom. Mom never drank red wine. She always said it gave her headaches and stained her teeth. She was strictly a white wine person, and only on special occasions. "Mom, were you drinking wine? And who is here with you?" She looked at the glasses like she was seeing them for the first time. Oh, those. Yes, that's from book club. We met here today instead of at Sarah's house like usual, and Janet brought this new red wine she wanted us to try. You know how Janet is with her wine recommendations. But I knew for a fact that Mom's book club met every Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. at Sarah's house, and it was Wednesday. Plus, Janet Morrison was diabetic and hadn't drunk alcohol in 5 years. And there were exactly 2 glasses, not the 4 or 5 there would be if the whole book club had been there. Just then, I heard the back door close and footsteps coming through the kitchen. Lisa, I'm finished with that call. Robert's voice stopped abruptly when he appeared in the doorway and saw me. He looked genuinely surprised and slightly panicked. His hair was messed up, and his usually perfectly pressed shirt was wrinkled. Sandra. Hey, babe. What are you doing here? I thought you were working late tonight. I was, but I had a horrible day and wanted to see Mom. What are you doing here? And why are you taking calls in Mom's backyard? Robert and Mom exchanged a quick glance, so fast I almost missed it. Your mom called me at work around 5:30, Robert said, straightening his shirt. She was having trouble with her computer, something about email not working, so I offered to stop by on my way home and take a look at it. It sounded reasonable. Robert was good with computers, and Mom still struggled with technology. But something felt off about the whole situation. Did you get it fixed? Oh yes, Mom jumped in. Robert is so smart with these computer things. It was just a simple setting that needed to be changed. And the phone call? Client emergency, Robert said. You know how Mr. Peterson is. When he calls, I have to answer, even after hours. When I hugged Robert goodbye that evening, I noticed something that made my stomach clench. There was a small coral-colored mark on his shirt collar, the same coral shade that Mom had been wearing on her lips. What's this stain? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual while pointing to his collar. Robert looked down at his shirt and shrugged. Probably from lunch. I had spaghetti at that Italian place near the bank, and you know what a messy eater I am. But the stain wasn't on the front of his shirt where food would spill. It was on his collar, right where someone's lips might brush if they were hugging or kissing. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe both of them so badly. These were the 2 people I loved most in the world, the 2 people I trusted completely. The idea that they might be lying to me was so horrible that I pushed it out of my mind. I'm just being paranoid, I told myself as I drove home. Mom's lonely, Robert's being nice to her, and I'm imagining problems that don't exist. But that night, lying in bed next to Robert, he'd insisted on staying over because I'd seemed upset and stressed. I stared at the ceiling and couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. The pieces didn't add up. The timing was wrong. The explanations felt rehearsed. And that coral lipstick mark on his collar kept flashing in my mind like a neon sign. I wanted to ask more questions, to push for better explanations, to trust my instincts. But I was so afraid of what I might discover that I chose to believe their lies instead of facing the truth. That was my first mistake. But it wouldn't be my last. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing patterns that I'd been blind to before, or maybe just hadn't wanted to see. Robert, who had always spent every weekend with me, suddenly had more work obligations. Saturday morning meetings with potential borrowers, Sunday afternoon appointments with clients who could only meet on weekends, evening calls that required him to step outside for privacy. I hate missing our time together, he'd say, kissing my forehead while putting on his jacket. But you know how competitive banking is right now. The economy's tough, and people need loans approved quickly. I have to be available when clients need me. It sounded reasonable. Robert had always been dedicated to his job, and the banking industry was competitive. But these client meetings were all new, and they always seemed to come up at the last minute. Meanwhile, Mom seemed to have developed a completely new lifestyle. The woman who used to spend weekends cleaning house and watching old movies on TV suddenly had a busy social calendar. Yoga classes on Saturday mornings, long walks on Sunday afternoons, coffee dates with friends from work that she'd never mentioned before. I'm just trying to get out of the house more, she explained when I commented on how busy she'd become. I realized I'd been living like a hermit since your dad died. It's time to start enjoying life again. She also started spending money on herself in ways that seemed out of character. Professional manicures every 2 weeks at a salon that charged $40 instead of the $15 place she'd been going to. A gym membership at the fancy CrossFit place instead of the basic Planet Fitness. New clothes, not expensive designer stuff, but nicer than her usual Walmart and Target purchases. Where's all this money coming from? I asked her one day when she showed up wearing a beautiful sweater I'd never seen before. I got that promotion at work, remember? From secretary to paralegal assistant. It came with a $250 a month raise, so I decided to treat myself a little. She had gotten a small promotion, but $250 a month didn't seem like enough to cover all these new expenses. When I mentioned this, she got defensive. Sandra, I've been putting every penny toward raising you and saving for your college for 18 years. I think I'm entitled to spend a little money on myself now that you're grown and getting married. She was right, of course. She deserved to treat herself. But something about the timing felt weird. The strangest change was in how both of them acted around their phones. Robert, who used to leave his phone lying around everywhere and would hand it to me to answer calls while he was driving, suddenly kept it in his pocket at all times and would step out of the room to take calls. Who is that? I'd ask when he came back from a mysterious phone conversation. Work stuff, he'd say vaguely. Just client follow-up. Mom, who had barely known how to text 6 months ago, was suddenly typing away constantly and giggling at whatever she was reading. Who are you texting so much? I asked her during one of our dinners together. Oh, just coordinating things for the wedding. You'd be surprised how many vendors need constant communication. The florist, the caterer, the photographer, everyone wants updates and confirmations. But we'd only booked the church, ordered my dress, and hired basic catering from the church kitchen. There weren't that many vendors to coordinate with. Then there was Robert's sudden expertise in Mom's preferences. He'd show up with her favorite candy, Butterfinger bars, which I didn't even know were her favorite. He'd bring her coffee from the specific McDonald's on Riverside Drive because he'd somehow figured out that their coffee tasted different from other locations. He'd remember that she liked romance novels and bring her new books by authors I'd never heard her mention. How do you know all these little details about what Mom likes? I asked him one Sunday after he'd surprised her with a crossword puzzle book featuring movie themes. I pay attention, he said with that charming smile that used to make my heart skip. She's going to be my mother-in-law. I want her to know I care about her happiness too. It should have made me happy. It should have made me feel lucky that my fiancé and my mother got along so well. But instead, it made me feel weird and left out, like they had this whole relationship that existed separate from me. If you're finding this story compelling, please consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and sharing this with someone who needs to hear it. Your comments mean everything to me. Let me know what you're thinking so far and what you would do in Sandra's situation. The real way-up call came in early April when I was organizing our wedding expenses. Robert and I had opened a joint savings account specifically for wedding costs, and we were each contributing $300 a month to cover the church rental, basic catering, flowers, and my dress. I was going through the bank statements online to make sure we were staying on budget when I saw charges that didn't make sense. There were several charges to restaurants I'd never been to, Applebee's for $67, Chili's for $43, and Tony's Italian Bistro for $89. All three were charged on evenings when I'd been working late and Robert said he was just grabbing fast food for dinner. My first thought was that someone had stolen our card information. But when I looked at the dates more carefully, I realized they were all on days when I'd had to stay late at the office for client presentations or project deadlines. Hey, I noticed some restaurant charges on our wedding account. I mentioned to Robert that evening while we were watching TV. Did you take clients out to dinner and accidentally use the wrong card? Robert didn't look up from the basketball game he was watching. What restaurants? Applebee's, Chili's, and Tony's Italian Bistro. About $250 total over the past month. Oh, those. He muted the TV and turned to face me. I took your mom out to dinner a couple times to look at potential rehearsal dinner locations. She wanted to check them out in person before we made any decisions. But we already booked the church fellowship hall for the rehearsal dinner. It's paid for. Well, she wanted to explore other options just in case. You know how thorough your mom is about planning. She doesn't want to settle for something if there might be a better choice. It made some sense. Mom was incredibly detail-oriented, and she had been talking about wanting the rehearsal dinner to be perfect. But $250 seemed like a lot of money to spend just checking out venues. A few days later, I decided to ask Mom about it directly. Robert mentioned he took you to some restaurants to look at rehearsal dinner locations. How did you like them? Mom looked confused for a second, then her expression cleared. Oh yes, they were nice. But I think the church fellowship hall is still the best choice for what we want. What did you think of the food? The food? It was fine. You know, typical chain restaurant food. But here's the thing about my mom, she had very strong opinions about food in restaurants. She would critique everything from the seasoning on the chicken to whether the lettuce in the salad was fresh. Her vague, non-committal response didn't sound like her at all. Which one did you like best? Oh, I don't know. They were all pretty similar. That definitely didn't sound like Mom. She would have had detailed opinions about the service, the atmosphere, the value for money. Something was off. That weekend, I did something I'd never done before in our relationship. While Robert was in the shower, I went through his car. I felt terrible about it, like I was violating his privacy and our trust. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there were pieces of the story I wasn't getting. In his glove compartment, underneath the insurance papers and owner's manual, I found a receipt that made my stomach drop. It was from Tony's Italian Bistro, dated the same evening as one of the charges on our account. But this wasn't a receipt for checking out rehearsal dinner options. It was for dinner for two with very specific details: 2 glasses of Pinot Grigio, Caesar salads, chicken marsala, and tiramisu to share. The total was $89.47, and at the bottom, someone had written "Happy Anniversary" in what looked like Mom's handwriting. Anniversary? What anniversary? I took a picture of the receipt with my phone and put everything back exactly where I'd found it. That evening, I couldn't concentrate on anything. The receipt kept flashing in my mind. Why would Mom write "Happy Anniversary" on a dinner receipt? Anniversary of what? A week later, I found something that made the restaurant receipts look innocent. I was doing laundry. Robert had been staying over more often, so I was washing some of his work shirts along with my clothes. As I was going through the pockets to make sure they were empty, I found a folded piece of paper in his navy blazer. It was a hotel receipt from the Omni Hotel downtown. A luxury suite for one night, charged to Robert's personal credit card. Room service charges for champagne, chocolate-covered strawberries, and something called romance package that cost an extra $75. The date on the receipt was from 3 weeks ago, the weekend I'd gone to San Antonio for my friend Jenny's bachelorette party. I sat on my bedroom floor, holding that receipt, feeling like the room was spinning around me. Robert had told me he was planning to spend that weekend catching up on work and maybe going to a Rangers game with his brother. He'd never mentioned anything about staying at a luxury hotel. And who stays at a luxury hotel in their own city unless they're with someone they can't bring home? The romance package detail made me feel sick. Chocolate-covered strawberries and champagne weren't something you ordered for yourself while catching up on paperwork. I took pictures of the receipt and tried to think of innocent explanations. Maybe he'd booked it as a surprise for us and then changed his mind. Maybe he'd been planning to propose again or celebrate some work achievement. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation that I just wasn't seeing. But deep down, I knew there wasn't. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the restaurant receipts with Mom's handwriting, the hotel receipt with romantic extras, the way they'd both been acting weird around their phones, and all the little moments that had felt off over the past few months. By morning, I'd made a decision. I needed to know what was really going on, and I needed proof that couldn't be explained away or rationalized. I was going to find out exactly what Robert and my mother were doing when they thought I wasn't watching. Stories like this take incredible courage to share, and I want to bring you more of them. If you're invested in seeing how this turns out, subscribing, liking, and sharing tells me you want more content like this. Plus, you'll never miss the ending of these intense stories. Comment below, what would you do in Sandra's situation? How would you handle discovering these receipts? I knew I needed to see what was really happening when they thought I wasn't around. So I decided to set up a situation where they'd feel safe to be together if that's what they were doing. I have to go to Dallas this weekend for my friend Amy's baby shower. I told both of them separately. I'll leave Saturday morning and be back Sunday evening. The lie came easier than I expected. When I told Robert, he seemed almost relieved. That sounds fun. Amy's your college roommate, right? I'm sure she's excited about the baby. What are you going to do while I'm gone? Probably just catch up on some work. Maybe watch the game with Mike. Nothing exciting. When I told Mom, she had a similar reaction. That's wonderful, honey. Amy's been trying to get pregnant for so long. I'm so happy for her. Will you be okay on your own this weekend? Oh, I'll be fine. I might catch up on some reading, maybe do some deep cleaning. You know how I like to stay busy. Neither of them asked for details about the baby shower, when it was, where it was being held, what I was getting Amy as a gift. In the past, they would have been full of questions and advice. This time, they both seemed distracted and eager to end the conversation. But I didn't go to Dallas. Instead, I booked a room at a La Quinta Inn on the other side of town, paid cash, and told them I was surprising my husband for our anniversary so they wouldn't ask for ID. Saturday evening, I drove to Mom's neighborhood and parked down the street where I could see her house, but stay hidden behind the Johnsons' big oak tree. I felt ridiculous sitting there in my Honda Civic with a bag of gas station snacks, like some kind of private investigator in a bad movie. But I had to know. At 7:30 p.m., Robert's silver Accord pulled into Mom's driveway. I watched him get out of his car carrying a bottle of wine and a small bouquet of flowers. Not the cheap flowers you grab at the grocery store checkout, but a nice arrangement from an actual florist. The front door opened before he even reached it, and Mom stepped out onto the porch. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something flowing and beautiful in a deep red color that looked expensive. Her hair was styled differently, more elegant than her usual casual look. They stood on the porch talking for a moment, and then she took his hand and led him inside. Not the casual, familial gesture you'd make with your future son-in-law. Something more intimate, more intentional. A few minutes later, most of the downstairs lights went off, but Mom's bedroom light upstairs stayed on. I sat in that car for 4 hours, watching that bedroom window, watching my entire world crumble around me. At 11:30 p.m., Robert came outside. Instead of leaving immediately, he and Mom stood on the porch talking quietly. She was wearing what looked like a silk robe, and when he kissed her goodbye, it wasn't a peck on the cheek. It was the kind of kiss you give someone you're in love with. I drove back to my hotel room and spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself there was still some innocent explanation for what I'd seen. Maybe Mom was upset about something and Robert was comforting her. Maybe she'd had some kind of emergency and he'd stayed to help. Maybe I'd misinterpreted what I'd seen because I was already suspicious and looking for problems. But I couldn't unsee that kiss. And I couldn't explain away the wine and flowers, or the expensive dress, or the way she'd taken his hand. The next day, Sunday, I drove home and pretended I'd just gotten back from Dallas. Both Robert and Mom called to ask how the baby shower went, and I made up details about decorations and games and gifts. How was your weekend? I asked each of them. Quiet, Robert said. Just relaxed at home mostly. Boring, Mom said. Just caught up on housework. More lies. 2 days later, Mom called me at work with what seemed like a routine request. Sandra, honey, I hate to bother you, but could you swing by the house and grab those wedding invitation samples from my kitchen counter? I need them for my appointment with the printer this afternoon, but I'm stuck at work dealing with a crisis. Of course, Mom. No problem. I drove to her house during my lunch break, let myself in with my key, and found the invitation samples right where she said they'd be. But as I was gathering them up, I accidentally knocked over a small stack of mail and papers on the counter. As I was picking everything up, one piece of paper caught my eye. It wasn't a bill or a catalog. It was a handwritten note in Mom's careful script. Robert, thank you for the most beautiful evening. You make me feel like the woman I used to be. All my love, L. My hands started shaking as I read it again. This wasn't a thank you note for helping with wedding planning or fixing her computer. This was a love note. I looked around the kitchen, my heart pounding, and noticed something else I'd missed before. On the windowsill above the sink, there was a small vase with fresh flowers, the same type of flowers I'd seen Robert carrying Saturday night. That's when I noticed Mom's bedroom door was open upstairs, and I could see her dresser from where I was standing. On top of it was a small leather journal I'd never seen before. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it was wrong to go through someone's private things. But I had to know what was really going on. I walked upstairs and picked up that journal, and my life changed forever. The first entry was dated 3 months ago. I know this is wrong, but I can't stop thinking about Robert. When he looks at me, I feel like I'm 25 again instead of 48. When he smiles at me, I remember what it felt like to be desired instead of just needed. I sat down hard on Mom's bed and kept reading. March 20th, he kissed me today. Sandra was at that client meeting in Houston, and Robert came over to help with wedding planning. We were looking at flower arrangements at the kitchen table, and when I looked up, he was staring at me with this expression I hadn't seen in years. He said I was beautiful. When was the last time anyone called me beautiful? When he leaned over and kissed me, I should have stopped him. But God help me, I kissed him back. March 28th, we made love for the first time last night. Sandra was at her work retreat in San Antonio, and Robert came over with wine and takeout from that Italian place. We talked for hours about everything, books, movies, dreams we'd given up on. He told me he'd been attracted to me since the first time we met, but he'd tried to ignore it because of Sandra. He said being with me felt like coming home. Page after page, entry after entry. My mother documenting her affair with my fiancé in careful detail. April 15th, I know I should feel guilty, but I don't. For the first time in 18 years, I feel alive. Robert makes me laugh, makes me feel intelligent and interesting and sexy. We talk about books and politics and life in ways I never could with David. God rest his soul. Is it wrong to want this happiness, even if it's complicated? May 3rd, we're talking about the future now. After the wedding, we'll wait a few months, maybe 6 or 8, and then Robert will tell Sandra that the marriage isn't working. We'll make it seem like a natural growing apart, not anyone's fault. She'll be hurt, but she's young and resilient. She'll recover and find someone better suited for her. Then Robert and I can be together openly. May 18th, only 3 more weeks until the wedding. I watch Sandra planning and shopping and getting excited, and I feel like the worst mother in the world. But I also can't wait for this charade to be over so Robert and I can start our real life together. He says marrying her is just something he has to do for appearances, but his heart belongs to me now. The journal slipped from my hands and fell to the floor. I sat there on my mother's bed, surrounded by wedding magazines and photos of her and me together, and realized that the 2 people I trusted most in the world had been planning to destroy my life. I was about to leave when I heard Mom's shower running in her bathroom. Her phone was sitting on the dresser, charging. For the second time that day, I did something I'd never done before. I invaded someone's privacy. Mom's phone didn't have a passcode. She'd always said she had nothing to hide from me, which now seemed like the cruelest irony imaginable. I opened her text messages and saw Robert's name at the top of the list. 412 text messages between them over the past 3 months. The most recent conversation made me feel physically sick. Robert, from yesterday, missing you already. Last night was incredible. Mom, I miss you too. Only 12 more days until this wedding is over, and we can start planning our real future. Robert, I feel bad sometimes, lying to Sandra like this. She trusts us completely. Mom, I know, baby. But she's strong. She'll bounce back from the divorce and find someone who can make her truly happy. We're not really hurting her if she doesn't know. Robert, you're right. And what we have is too special to give up. I've never felt this way about anyone. Mom, neither have I. Not even with David. You're my soulmate, Robert. I can't wait to be with you openly. I scrolled back through weeks of messages. Daily, good morning beautiful and sweet dreams my love exchanges. Photos sent back and forth, pictures of Mom in outfits she was buying, pictures of Robert at work, selfies of them together in various hotel rooms and restaurants. Plans for secret meetings. Sandra's working late Thursday. Come over around 7 and I'll cook that pasta dish you love. Discussions about covering their tracks. If Sandra asks about the restaurant charge, tell her we were looking at rehearsal dinner venues. And worst of all, conversations where they laughed about how easy I was to fool. Robert, She saw the hotel receipt, but I told her I was planning a surprise that fell through. She believed it completely. Mom, she's always been trusting, even as a little girl. Sometimes I think she's too naive for her own good. Robert, her innocence is part of what I used to love about her. Now it just makes this easier. Mom, don't feel guilty. We can't help who we fall in love with. And Sandra will understand eventually love isn't something you can control or schedule. I screenshot the most damaging conversations and emailed them to myself, then put Mom's phone back exactly where I found it. I drove to the same park where I'd gone after finding the hotel receipt and sat in my car, trying to process everything I discovered. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated plan to use me, humiliate me, and then discard me when it became convenient for them to be together openly. They weren't just betraying me, they were enjoying it. They thought I was stupid, naive, too trusting for my own good. They were laughing about how easy it was to lie to me, how completely I believed their explanations. And they had it all planned out. Robert would marry me, we'd play house for 6 or 8 months, and then he'd tell me the marriage was a mistake. I'd be devastated, probably blame myself for not being a good enough wife, and they'd comfort me through the difficult divorce, while secretly celebrating that they could finally be together. I would have spent months or even years thinking I'd failed at marriage, never knowing that it was doomed from the beginning because my husband was in love with my mother. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. Then I got angry, angrier than I'd ever been in my life. But as I sat there in that park, watching normal people walking their dogs and playing with their children, I realized something important. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to give them a chance to lie their way out of this, or manipulate me into forgiveness, or convince me that I'd misunderstood what I'd seen and read. And I wasn't going to cancel the wedding quietly and let them tell people that I'd gotten cold feet, or that we'd grown apart. Everyone who was planning to witness our wedding deserved to know what they were really celebrating. My friends, my coworkers, Robert's colleagues, Mom's church friends, they all deserved to know the truth about the people they thought they were supporting. If Robert and Mom wanted to play games with my life, I was going to show them what real consequences looked like. I wasn't just calling off a wedding. I was going to make sure that everyone who mattered knew exactly why. If you're shocked by this betrayal, please subscribe to Revenge with Nick and join others who appreciate these real-life stories. Give this video a like if it's keeping you engaged, and share it with someone who needs to see this. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done differently? How would you have handled discovering that journal? I spent that entire Wednesday night in my apartment, planning exactly what I was going to do at the wedding. First, I organized all the evidence I'd gathered. I printed out the most damaging text message conversations, made copies of the hotel and restaurant receipts, and photographed every relevant page of Mom's journal. I put everything in a manila folder that I could easily access during the ceremony. Then I started thinking about the audience. Our wedding was going to have about 250 people, not huge, but big enough to include everyone who mattered in our lives. From Robert's side, his parents, his brother and sister-in-law, his colleagues from First National Bank, including his boss, Mr. Henderson, his college buddies, and neighbors from his apartment complex. From my side, Mom's friends from work and church, our neighbors who'd watched me grow up, my coworkers from the marketing firm, my college friends, and extended family members who were driving in from Houston and San Antonio. All these people who had bought gifts, requested time off work, and made plans to celebrate what they thought was going to be a beautiful love story. They deserved to know who they were really celebrating. I also realized I needed documentation of the event itself. I called my friend Jessica, who worked as a photographer for the Austin American-Statesman. Jess, I need a huge favor, and I need you not to ask too many questions until afterward. Okay, you're kind of scaring me. What's going on? Can you come to my wedding this Saturday with your camera? Something newsworthy is going to happen, and I want it properly documented. There was a long pause. Sandra, what are you planning? Please tell me you're not going to do anything dangerous or illegal. Nothing dangerous, I promise. I'm just going to tell the truth in front of people who deserve to hear it. The truth about what? About who Robert and my mother really are. After another pause, she said, I'll be there. But Sandra, Whatever you're planning, make sure you can live with the consequences. I can live with the consequences of telling the truth, I said. I can't live with the consequences of staying silent. Friday night was Robert's bachelor party. Nothing elaborate, just drinks and dinner with 5 guys from work at a sports bar downtown. He kissed me goodbye around 7 p.m., told me he loved me, and promised to be home by midnight. Bachelor parties are overrated anyway, he said, adjusting his collar in my hallway mirror. I'd rather spend the evening with you, but the guys insisted. Have fun, I said, kissing him goodbye. Just don't do anything I wouldn't do. Never, he said with that charming smile. You're the only woman I want. As soon as he left, I got in my car and drove to Mom's neighborhood. I parked in my usual spot behind the oak tree and waited. At 8:45 p.m., Mom's car pulled out of her driveway. I followed her at a careful distance, watching as she drove across town to the same small motel where I'd seen them before, the Budget Inn on Highway 35. Robert's car was already in the parking lot. I parked across the street and watched through the window as they moved around the room. They weren't being secretive or careful anymore, at least not with each other. They looked relaxed, happy, like a couple in love spending a romantic evening together. At one point, Robert opened a bottle of champagne and they toasted something while laughing. Probably toasting the fact that after tomorrow, they wouldn't have to hide anymore. I sat in my car until 11:30 p.m., watching them celebrate what they thought was going to be the end of their deception and the beginning of their real relationship. Then I drove home and spent the rest of the night alternating between crying and feeling absolutely determined to go through with my plan. I woke up Saturday morning at 6 a.m. feeling calmer than I'd felt in weeks. Today was going to change everything, but not in the way anyone expected. I took a long shower, did my own hair and makeup, nothing elaborate, but neat and presentable, and got dressed in regular clothes. I decided to get into my wedding dress at the church so I could keep the evidence folder with me until the last minute. At 9 a.m., my bridesmaids knocked on my apartment door. I'd asked my cousin Sarah and 2 friends from work, Michelle and Karen, to be my bridesmaids. They were excited and chattering about the day ahead, completely unaware of what was really going to happen. Are you nervous? Sarah asked as we loaded everything into her car for the drive to the church. Not nervous, I said honestly. More like ready. Ready for everyone to see who I really am. That's such a sweet way to put it, Michelle said. Robert is so lucky to be marrying someone as genuine as you. Today, everyone's going to see exactly how genuine I am, I replied. We arrived at St. Matthew's Church at 10 a.m. It's a small, traditional church that seats about 250 people comfortably. The sanctuary has beautiful stained glass windows and old wooden pews that have been there for decades. It was the church where Mom and Dad had gotten married 30 years ago and where I'd been baptized as a baby. Mom was already there, looking absolutely radiant in her lavender dress. She'd bought it specifically for the wedding, a beautiful, flattering outfit that probably cost more than she usually spent on clothes in 6 months. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup was perfect, and she was glowing with what everyone assumed was maternal pride. "Oh, sweetheart," she said when she saw me, pulling me into a tight hug. "This is the most beautiful day of our lives. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so happy for you and Robert." "Thank you, Mom," I said, hugging her back. "After today, everything's going to be exactly as it should be. I love you so much, Sandra. I just want you to be happy." I will be. After today, I'm going to be exactly where I need to be. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Getting dressed now. Can't wait to see you at the altar. I love you more than words can express." I screenshot the message and added it to my evidence folder. At 11:30, I went into the small room behind the sanctuary to put on my wedding dress. It wasn't an expensive gown. I'd found it on sale at David's Bridal for $400, but it was beautiful and made me feel confident and strong. As my bridesmaids helped me with the buttons and adjusted my simple veil, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone I barely recognized. Not because I looked different, but because I felt different. 6 months ago, I'd been a woman who trusted completely, who believed the best about everyone, who would rather make excuses for people than face uncomfortable truths. Today, I was a woman who had discovered the truth and was brave enough to act on it, no matter how painful the consequences might be. "You look absolutely beautiful," Karen said, tears in her eyes. "Robert is going to die when he sees you." "I certainly hope so," I said, and I meant it in a completely different way than she thought. We're at the climax of this incredible story, and I want to make sure you don't miss what happens next. If you're invested in this journey, please subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Your comments fuel these stories. Let me know what you're thinking right now. Are you ready for what Sandra's about to do? At 12:45 p.m., I could hear the church filling up with guests. The sound of voices, footsteps, and rustling programs drifted through the walls of the small preparation room. Pastor Williams had arranged for a string quartet for members from the church who volunteered their time to play soft music as people found their seats. Through the window, I could see cars still arriving in the parking lot. Robert's colleagues from the bank stepping out in their best suits. Mom's friends from church dressed in their Sunday finest. My coworkers from the marketing firm looking excited to celebrate with me. All these people who cared about me, who had given up their Saturday afternoon to witness what they thought was going to be the beginning of my happily ever after. At 1 p.m., Pastor Williams knocked on the door. "Sandra, dear, we're ready whenever you are. Robert is at the altar and everyone looks beautiful. Are you feeling okay? You seem very calm for a bride." "I'm perfect, Pastor Williams. I've never been more ready for anything in my life." He smiled. "That's wonderful to hear. Your parents would be so proud, both of them. Your father is looking down on this day with such joy." "I hope so," I said. "I think Dad would want me to be honest about who I am and what I deserve." The processional began with Wagner's Bridal Chorus, the traditional wedding march that Mom had insisted on. My bridesmaids walked down the aisle in their simple pink dresses, carrying small bouquets of white roses. Sarah, Michelle, and Karen, all smiling at the guests and taking their places at the altar. From the small window in the preparation room, I could see into the sanctuary. Robert stood at the altar in his navy blue suit, the nicest one he owned, purchased specifically for this day. He looked nervous but happy, adjusting his tie and smiling at guests. His best man, his brother Mike, stood beside him along with two groomsmen from his college fraternity. In the front row on the left side, Mom sat in the place of honor, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She looked like the picture-perfect mother of the bride, elegant, emotional, and radiantly happy. On the right side, Robert's parents sat with proud smiles. Mr. and Mrs. Chin, who had welcomed me into their family and were excited to see their son marry such a nice girl from a good family. Behind them, the pews were filled with faces I'd known my entire life. Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd been our neighbor for 15 years. My old high school English teacher, Mrs. Patterson. Coworkers who'd become friends. Family members who'd driven hours to be here. All these people who loved me, who were here to celebrate what they thought was going to be a beautiful beginning. When the bridal march began, everyone rose to their feet and turned toward the back of the church. I took a deep breath, picked up my bouquet with the evidence folder hidden inside, and walked toward the sanctuary doors. The doors opened, and I stepped into the sanctuary. The afternoon sun was streaming through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the floor. Over 200 faces turned toward me, smiling with anticipation and joy. I walked down that aisle slowly, looking at each section of guests. My coworkers in the third row, beaming with excitement. Mom's church friends in the fourth row, some wiping away tears. Robert's banking colleagues near the back, nodding approvingly. As I passed each row, I thought about how their expressions were going to change in the next few minutes. How their smiles would turn to shock, then confusion, then understanding. Robert's face lit up when he saw me. He looked genuinely happy, genuinely in love with the woman he was about to marry. For just a moment, I felt a flash of sadness for the man I'd thought he was, kind, honest, devoted. That man had never really existed, but I'd loved him completely. In the front row, Mom was crying softly into her handkerchief. She looked like every mother should look at her daughter's wedding, proud, emotional, overwhelmed with joy at this milestone moment. But I knew those tears weren't for my happiness. They were tears of relief that after today, she and Robert wouldn't have to hide their relationship anymore. I reached the altar and took Robert's hands. They were shaking slightly, but everyone probably assumed it was from normal wedding nerves. Pastor Williams opened his worn Bible and smiled at the congregation. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God to witness the union of Robert Michael Chin and Sandra Marie Wells in holy matrimony. I let him continue through the traditional opening, waiting for exactly the right moment. Marriage is a sacred covenant, not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, deliberately, and in accordance with God's holy ordinance. Perfect words. Let's talk about reverence and God's ordinance. If there is anyone present who has just cause why these two should not be joined in marriage, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. This was it. The moment I'd been planning for. Instead of the traditional silence, I stepped forward and gently took the microphone from Pastor Williams' hands. Actually, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the church's sound system, I need to say something first. The church went completely silent. 250 people stopped breathing at the same time. I want to thank everyone for being here today, I began, my voice steady and clear. It means everything to me that you would give up your Saturday afternoon to witness what you thought would be the beginning of my happily ever after. Confused murmurs started rippling through the pews. This wasn't part of any wedding ceremony they'd ever attended. But I've learned something this week that I think you all need to know before this ceremony continues. I reached into my bouquet and pulled out the manila folder containing all my evidence. 3 days ago, I discovered that my fiancé and my mother have been having an affair for the past 3 months. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Gasps echoed through the sanctuary. Someone in the back pews said, "Oh my God," loud enough for everyone to hear. I could hear programs hitting the floor as people leaned forward in shock. Robert stepped toward me, his face white with panic. "Sandra, stop this. You're making a terrible mistake. This is our wedding day." "You're right, Robert. This was supposed to be our wedding day. But it's hard to marry someone who's been sleeping with your mother." I opened the folder and pulled out the printed pages from Mom's journal. I found my mother's journal detailing their affair. Would you like me to read some entries? In the front row, Mom had gone completely still, her handkerchief forgotten in her lap. "Sandra, please, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly, Mom. Let me share what you wrote so everyone else can understand too." I held up the first journal page and read clearly into the stunned silence. March 20th, he kissed me today. Sandra was at that client meeting in Houston, and Robert came over to help with wedding planning. When he leaned over and kissed me, I should have stopped him. But God help me, I kissed him back. The church erupted in shocked whispers and gasps. Robert's parents were staring at their son in horror. His colleagues from the bank were looking at each other in disbelief. April 15th, I continued reading. We made love for the first time last night. Sandra was at her work retreat in San Antonio, and Robert came over with wine and takeout. He told me he'd been attracted to me since the first time we met, but he'd tried to ignore it because of Sandra. "That's enough," Robert shouted, but his voice cracked with desperation. His father stood up from the front row, his face red with rage and embarrassment. "Is this true, Robert? Tell me this isn't true." I pulled out my phone and showed the screenshots of their text messages. Here's a text conversation from yesterday. "Robert to my mother, only 12 more days until this wedding is over, and we can start planning our real future." The church was in complete chaos now. People were standing, pointing, whispering furiously to each other. I could see some of Mom's church friends gathering their purses and heading for the exits, their faces showing disgust and disappointment. And here's my mother's response. "I can't wait to be with you openly. Sandra will understand eventually. She's strong and she'll bounce back from the divorce." That's when Mom completely broke down. She collapsed back into the pew, sobbing harsh, ugly cries that echoed through the sanctuary. But I could see in her face that she wasn't just crying from embarrassment. She was crying because her perfect plan had been destroyed. Robert was frantically trying to salvage the situation, but there was nothing left to salvage. "Everyone, please, this is all taken out of context. Sandra's been under a lot of stress. Don't you dare try to make this about my mental state," I said into the microphone. I have 3 months of evidence. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, love notes, journal entries. This isn't stress or imagination. This is documented betrayal. I looked out at the congregation, all these people who had supported me, who had come here to celebrate with me. I want you all to know that this isn't about revenge, I said. This is about truth. This is about refusing to build a life on lies. And this is about choosing my own dignity over their betrayal. I handed the microphone back to Pastor Williams, who looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. Then I walked back down that aisle, my head held high, my simple wedding dress flowing behind me. As I passed Robert's parents, his father stood up. Sandra, I am so deeply sorry. We had no idea. This is not how we raised our son. I know you didn't, Mr. Chen. You're good people. You deserve better than this too. Behind me, I could hear Robert trying desperately to explain himself to his father, his voice breaking with panic and desperation. But there was nothing left to explain. The truth was out, and everyone had heard it. Outside the church, Jessica was waiting with her camera, just as she'd promised. Sandra, are you okay? That was incredible. Are you sure you're all right? I'm perfect, I said, and for the first time in months, I meant it completely. My phone was already buzzing with calls and texts, but I ignored them all except one. A text from my college friend Amy. Holy shit, Sandra. I can't believe what just happened. You're the bravest person I know. Within hours, word was spreading through Austin's social media. Within 24 hours, Robert had been quietly let go from First National Bank. His boss felt that his personal conduct issues reflected poorly on the institution's family values. Mom called me 17 times that first day. I didn't answer any of them. But the message that meant the most came from Robert's father that evening. Sandra, what my son did was unforgivable. You handled this with more grace and dignity than either of them deserved. I hope you find the happiness you deserve with someone who values your trust. You have our complete support. 3 days later, I was back at work, receiving congratulations from coworkers who'd witnessed the whole thing. Not congratulations on getting married, but congratulations on standing up for myself. I could never have done what you did, my boss said. That took incredible courage. But it hadn't felt like courage. It had felt like the only choice I could live with. I wasn't going to be the woman who discovered betrayal and suffered in silence. I wasn't going to protect people who had planned to humiliate me. And I wasn't going to let 250 people witness a ceremony built on lies. I chose truth over comfort, dignity over silence, and myself over people who had chosen each other over me. Thank you for staying with me through this entire incredible journey. If this story moved you, subscribing means everything to me and helps me continue bringing these powerful stories to light. Hit that like button if you think Sandra made the right choice. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know in the comments what you would have done in her situation. Hit that notification bell too. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Remember, you deserve people in your life who choose you first, not people who make you their backup plan while they pursue what they really want.